Report number 2.
Element 1, all present accounted for, sir.
Good morning, Prescott.
1, 2, present accounted for, sir.
Stand for the Pledge
All
of
present
Allegiance.
accounted for, sir.
Thank you. Pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Room. All present accounted for, sir. Carry on. Seats.
Why don't you turn off the speaker there, Grant, please? Okay, guys, I'd like to welcome you all to a special session of SAL. We have Mr. Smucker obviously here today to talk to you. Mr. Smucker, everybody knows you, but I'd like to introduce you to your SAL class. We call it Senior Academy Leadership.
Okay.
And basically it's sophomores. Sophomores, raise your hand. Juniors, raise your hand. And then seniors, raise your hand. So we have kind of equal distribution of students. And despite how many times I yell at them, and despite the high achievement that I require of them, I'm quite public in talking about their success. In this classroom, the average GPA is 3.8, which I challenge you to find in any other AP classes. And whether or not these students know it, with these 15 kids, we're talking millions of dollars worth of scholarships that have happened in the next few years. You don't know that yet. I see, let's see, 15 kids, I bet you 7 or 6 will apply for the Flynn Scholarship. I bet you we have 2 Flynn Scholarships sitting in this room. I bet you we have 2 or 3 people who are going to academies. I bet you we have 2 or 3 going to ROTCs, applying to ROTCs. They don't know that yet, but it'll be interesting. In fact, we should do that in a few years, have you come back and let's see the success. Anyway, I'm very proud of every one of them. We challenge them with different higher level expectations. We give them money and tell them to do a military ball. This weekend we raised about $1,500 with orienteering meet. We're my sophomores in charge of we tell them to go to La Fuentes and work out connecting the generation with older shut-ins, and they've done that, so everybody's got a liaison at La Fuentes. So it's really a special class, and I'm very excited about it. They don't see my excitement because, again, I have the higher level of expectations for them. With that, Mr. Smucker is here to talk to you about his experiences, where he was as a high school kid, and how did he become our boss. So anyway, everybody welcome Mr. Smucker then, please.
Thanks for having me here this morning, Monday morning, and you guys probably woke up today and first thought was 1 week and we got fall break. That's what I thought. But it's nice to be here. I visit with Colonel Peoples, and I didn't really plan anything, but have some things I'd like to share with you. Anytime if you want to ask me a question, please feel free to do that. So when I said, is there anything you'd like me to touch on? First of all, I want to congratulate you in being in this class. I understand it's an achievement in itself to be sitting in these chairs, and congratulations. Leadership in and of itself is a challenge that never stops, and you might recognize that with all the different kinds of activities that you do, and in supporting this program and in the direction it's headed. So he said I could talk about myself. Usually when I go places, I usually want other people to talk about themselves. There's a fellow that wrote a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. His name was Andrew Carnegie. And it's an old book. And I remember when I was a kid, well, not a kid, I was probably in high school, and I saw that book sitting on a shelf in my home, and I looked at that. And one thing that I remember out of that book, it says, wherever you go, if you get people talking about themselves, that could be in school here, that could be a church, that could be at a function that you go to, it could be a wedding that you go to sometime and you meet someone for the first time. If you get them talking about themselves, and they talk about themselves for 15 minutes, and you say, nice meeting you, they're going to say, I really like that guy. And you really don't have to say anything because people like to talk about themselves. So usually I like to ask the questions, but I'll share a little bit with you, kind of about my pathway. First of all, my folks, my father was a superintendent of schools, believe it or not, and I had 3 sisters, and they all went into education as well. So, you know, the conversations that we had at the table when I was a kid was around education. And that's just, you know, as a little kid, I used to listen to that and hear that. And that was just kind of who we all were in our family. And I think we respected my father an awful lot. My mother was a generation where she stayed home. So every day I went home, I knew that she was going to be there. It was comforting for me, and didn't know it at the time, but it was kind of a nice thing. So I grew up in an education family. I grew up in Illinois. I was born in Rockford, Illinois, which sits about an hour and a half away from Chicago. And I moved around a little bit with my dad. I remember I was in kindergarten in Western Illinois University. My dad was a professor at the college there. And I was in kindergarten, and then he decided to go get his doctorate. And we moved to Bloomington, Indiana, and he went to the University of Indiana, and I was in 1st grade there. And I think he got his doctorate in like a year and a half, and so he lived there. And then he had a superintendency in the Chicagoland area. I don't know if anybody knows Chicago or anything about it. Anybody ever been to Chicago?
My uncle lives there.
Pardon me?
My uncle lives in Rockford.
He lives in Rockford?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't live there very long. But anyhow, he took a superintendency in northwest suburbs. And we were there for 4 years. During that time, I lived on we lived on a lake. We were fortunate to live on a lake. I remember how much I enjoyed that. We had our ice skating rink in the backyard. And when we came home, we always kept the snow off it. And I played ice hockey and stuff when I was a little kid. And one of my passions, and a passion that I still have, and I don't know if any of you have done it, but I love to ice fish.
Oh my gosh, that's scary.
Passionate about ice fishing.
I
I do tournaments in Colorado during the year. I take off.
Ice
and I
fish?
I
I tell you what, let me bring this up here behind you, and I'll we'll
Yeah.
So you would ice fish.
Ice fish.
That's kind of scary.
Yes.
You don't know like Ken Malinowski, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay. He was very competitive.
No, that's okay.
Fishing.
What's that?
He was extremely competitive.
Was he?
My godfather.
Well, neat. So I think I was there until about 6th grade, and then my folks, my dad took another superintendency, and it was in central Illinois. Had never lived outside of like suburban Chicago, and we moved to a farming community. And
No ice fishing over there.
there wasn't a lot of it. It was far enough south that everybody spoke with a twang. We started getting into that southern kind of thing with greasy pans, and you know, it was a little bit different. I did pick up some of that. I was there for 6 years. I graduated from Charleston High School. It was a university town, which was kind of cool. Eastern Illinois University's there. And Tony Romo graduated. Mike Shanahan. I don't know if you know that name, but Mike Shanahan was the coach of the Broncos, and now he's the coach of the Washington Redskins. When I was in 7th grade, he was my basketball coach, which is kind of a cool thing.
That's awesome.
And he was a graduate assistant, and I remember he lived in a condo not too far from me. I remember him not having a car, and he'd jump on my Schwinn Suburban, and I would sit in the seat and hang on to his shirt. He'd take me home, and then I'd ride the rest of the way. So I knew Mike Shanahan fairly well when I was a kid, and I got to reacquainted with him when he was in Denver. When he came, and I had a chance to say hello, and we visited a little bit about some of that time. That was kind of a cool thing. Charleston was a farming community, and I had a great experience there. I really enjoyed high school. I don't know that I would have been sitting in this class. I think a 3.8 was not my target. Had fun in school, enjoyed school, and I participated in a lot of athletic programs. I played in the band until 8th grade, and then I enjoyed basketball and football, golfed a little bit here and there. But and we did track. Those were the years where when I talked to Grant a little bit. He goes, "Oh, I swim all year round." When I was in high school, you play a sport and then you play the next sport and you play the next sport, and there wasn't club stuff all year round. If I played basketball in the summer, it was a ball and they'd get a bunch of guys and we go to a court and play. So it was a little simpler maybe. So you had lots of opportunities to do different things. But really enjoyed it. So my senior year, my father went back up to the Chicago area and was a superintendent up there. So he moved and took another superintendency and we moved north. And I left all my friends and moved into the Chicago area, which there's a huge culture change from a small community and moving into a city. I went to a small private college in Wisconsin called Carthage College. It's south of Milwaukee, not too far across the border of Illinois. There's about 1,500 students. And I don't know that I always made the greatest choices when I was at Carthage College. I don't know that I really knew what I wanted to do. It was a learning ground for me, and I experienced an awful lot that I think made me who I am today. But after 2 years, I made a decision to leave that school. And I enrolled in Northern Illinois University, which is just not too far away from Rockford. It's southeast. It's about an hour from Chicago. And I finished up at Northern Illinois University with a degree in education. And I was a physical education teacher and a health teacher. And so my first job that I had as a teacher, and one of the reasons I went into that is because I love to coach. And I love basketball is my favorite sport, not very tall. I always wanted to be 6'5", never made it. That was my goal. But I taught for 7 years in a K-8 school in Illinois. And I said, you know what, I think I need to get out of the city, even though I was a huge sports fan and loved all, I still loved the Bears and Blackhawks and all that. I decided to move, and I had a couple buddies that lived in Colorado. So quit my teaching job, took a risk, and didn't have a job, loaded everything in the truck, and moved to Denver, found a small place to live right in the city, and decided to go back and get my master's degree. I knew education was important. It was important in our family. I worked at a place in a health club, a really nice health club, got to know some people there, and I substitute taught for 1.5 years while I was getting my master's. And so those subs that you have today, be nice to them. That's a tough
They could
job.
be your boss.
They could be, maybe someday. But had a great experience doing that and saw a lot of different kinds of things. And PE jobs, being a physical education teacher in Denver, is a really tough job to find because it's a super active community. So I couldn't land one. So I was just about done with my master's program, and I remember I hadn't received a job, and it was right in the beginning of the school year, just like here, think about this school year. And I remember there was a dean's position, these are larger schools, and there was a dean of students position at a middle school. And when I found out about it that morning, that the door opened, I was sitting in the office, just like a student that had been in trouble, waiting for that principal to walk in. And I didn't know her. All I knew is that I wanted that job. And when she came in, I asked her if I could spend a few minutes with her. And I said, I'm the person that you want to hire here. And she opened the door for me. I mean, that opened. I mean, I had to show some initiative and let people know, and I think that that's true for all of us. If you have some intention of what you want, that's a good thing, and sometimes those things come true. So anyhow, so I spent about 12 years, 13 years in the Denver area, and I worked at a couple different high schools. I really like the high school kids. You guys are smart, think on your feet. Middle school kids are smart, and they don't think on their feet all the time. It's just a whole different kind of an atmosphere. But worked in some big high schools. I was at Eagle Crest High School, and there were 3,000 kids there. And then the middle school I was in, there were 1,500, and then I moved to another high school that was about 2,500. And I was assistant principal and learned an awful lot. Coached some basketball while I was doing that. And then my family and I, we moved west, across the Continental Divide. I don't know if any of you have heard Glenwood Springs, Colorado. So I was on the western side of the Continental Divide in town called Rifle. There's only one rifle in the United States, I think. I was always embarrassed to kind of say rifle. Seemed kind of an odd thing to me, but had a good experience there as a high school principal. And how these jobs and how things happen. I don't really know if you have a list of things and know exactly what you want to do. But I was telling Colonel Peoples when I came in here this morning, he said, talk about some of the situations where you've kind of tripped and had a hard time and had to get back up and dust yourself off and keep moving. I never thought I was going to be a superintendent of schools. You know what? I love being in the classroom and I like being a leader. I like being a leader. And when I get in groups, I like to listen and I like to figure out how we go places and what we do. I like change and to develop change. And I knew those qualities about me. But a couple weeks ago, and I don't know if any of you attended, I think juniors and seniors, you had a chance to go into the Roost Street Theater and you heard some of those folks talk about their careers and what they're doing in business. I was sitting there, and the thing that I took from that, and I don't know what y'all gathered from that information, but the one guy, the physical therapist, that started off, he goes, how many people want to be a pro athlete? And everybody, I wanted to be a pro athlete, and then he said, these are some of the things. So I went to school for this, and that didn't work out. And then I tried this, and the next thing I knew, I think that fellow went into communications or something like that. And he was going to be a writer, and a sports beat writer, and wanted to do this and get on TV. And then he saw this wasn't going to work, and so then he said, I could be a physical therapist. Like half the people there had times where they failed, or they were asked not to come back to a school, or they ran into something in some difficult times. And then they're all successful in what they were doing. And I don't know if you all heard that, but I can tell you that this life, as I've found it, is full of ups and downs, and sometimes you hit the skids pretty hard. You take a really hard fall, and you get back up. That's what I kind of took from that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyhow, I was a high school principal for like 3 or 4 years, and then I asked me to come into the district office, and I was an assistant principal. Actually, I didn't really want that job. I was going to go move back to Denver and be a principal at a really large high school. And I came and I told my boss, I said, I'm going to leave. I had a really nice offer from a high school not far from Denver International Airport. And he goes, well, what does it take to keep you here? And the assistant superintendent was leaving, and he said, would you take this job? And I went and I talked with my wife, and I go, do we want to stay? The community is really small. And growing up in a city and being in Denver, I had a little bit of a challenge with that really small community. And in my position, which gets to be pretty political, a lot of people watch every move I make with some things. And I said, I'll stay. And then he leaves 2 years later, and the school board says, we'd like you to be the superintendent. And the next thing you know, I'm the superintendent. So I was like, wow, I don't know how this happened. Yes?
What was the population at that time in comparison to
The population in Rifle was 10,000. So as you go up Valley, like we were about an hour and 15 minutes away from Vail, and I was an hour and 15 minutes from Aspen. So it's kind of a cool area. Did a lot of skiing and that kind of thing in the mountains. But there were 2 other communities that were also, but they were even smaller than Rifle. But I had the same number of students. Actually, I had a few more students than what we have in this school district. But they were comparable. They were similar. But it was pretty small. Like no one would know who I was if I got a new car for maybe like 2 weeks, and then they go, "Oh, that's that." But everybody knew everybody's car, and you guys might be like that around here a little bit. When you see a friend's car, you know who it is. But everybody knew who was coming and going. It was interesting, and there were only like 3 or 4 restaurants, and so. But anyhow, so how did I end up in Prescott? My grandparents moved to Phoenix in one of those retirement areas in like 1979. And when I was teaching and stuff, I always wanted to get out of the cold of Chicago and come down, and I always would visit them once or twice a year and like the Phoenix area. And then my grandparents passed away, and my folks owned that home, and they come down here, they're snowbirds. And I thought, I'd kind of like to move closer. And I saw this position open up, and I thought, what, I'm going to jump at this and throw my name in the hat, and was fortunate to come to this community and have an opportunity to be a leader here. Some good things, lots of really great kids, and there's a lot of good things in this community. You all might be sitting here thinking, man, I can't wait to get out of high school and I'm going to go somewhere else and experience that. And that's good. I mean, you know what? You want to have all those kind of experiences, but this community is a special place too. Yeah. So, you know, I had 3 sisters. Had some hardships with that. I had a sister when I was in college pass away, and she had just given birth to a child like 2 weeks before. You know, those are one of those things where you gotta jump back up on your feet a little bit, you know. And I had my ups and downs with different people and in different schools, and you just figure out how to work through those kinds of things. But happy to be here. Do you, as far as like leadership, I mean, guys, do you know what I do as a superintendent? Do you have any idea? Well, I really, my desk is a little bit bigger than this. My chair is really soft. And most people think that I just sit in that soft chair behind that big desk, and I give them more work to do.
I bet he didn't get the chair out of the dumpster like I did, right?
You know where I got that chair? I got it free, but I had to work on it. See how I get picked on right away? A special chair. But I really feel responsible for all of you in the education that you're getting. And this program here is one that, you know, I fully support, the board supports, but you guys are doing a great job. But my job is the school board hires me. There are 5 members on the board. I'm the only employee that they hire. And at any given meeting, they can put their hands up, and I'm off to another place. If their 3 hands go up out of the 5, and they say, we think we'd like to head in a different direction. So my job's pretty volatile that way. And I think things are going well there in that but I have to nurture it. But then my job is to hire and have a system that hires teachers and hires all the other folks. So really we have about 700 employees in this business. It's like the 3rd or 4th largest business in this area. And so, you know, I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility. When a bus crashes, a student gets in a fight, something happens, usually it will, if it's not Mrs. Hillig's fault or Mr. Peoples' fault, then, and they're not happy, then they come to me and they share their frustration. My saying is, bring me your problems, good news weakens me. Because that's what I deal with. But I like conflict resolution and doing things like that. But I have to be a little bit of a visionary, and I have to think about a direction that we go and where we go as a school district. There's a tremendous amount of change happening for all of you in your lives right now, and the things that I've seen in education and the changes that have occurred are happening at like lightning speed right now. And my biggest concern is that the kindergartners right now and the 1st graders that we have in the school district, we don't even know what kind of jobs they're going to apply for. Because it's moving so fast. The world's flat. It's global. You guys know about, I mean, you know an awful lot more about technology than I do. But you know how quickly you can get information from all over the world. You know, Googling ice fishing and all that, you know, whatever. But the issue is how do we provide support for your thinking and for your abilities so that when you get out, you can be successful at whatever you want to do. You can live your dream. And those are the things that when I get up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and I'm thinking, oh gosh, what are we going to do with this? Or how can we make the high school better? I know technologies are issues. I know that's a way that you learn. So, you know, I think an awful lot about things like that. And then I have to put some systems in place and try and make that happen. Got 2 wonderful folks here that lead this program. And, you know, it's great having people like that on your staff because you don't even have to ask them to do things. They take off and they're leaders in and of themselves. And I think that's probably one of the most important things that we do is we hire great people and let them spread their wings and go. I do not micromanage. I'm not telling Colonel Peoples what to do. Usually he comes and tells me what I need to do. And this is what I want, and I say, you know what, let's go for it. We're going to try and make that happen. But
It's kind of like with Sal, we talk about if they don't do anything dumb or dangerous or illegal or immoral, they can do it.
yeah. But I love risk takers. I throw it out and let's give it a try. I've got a vision for where I'd like to see a high school like this go. I spent probably I've been doing this for 32 years. I don't feel like I'm that old, but I guess I don't have a lot of hair in my head. I used to comb for 10 years or shampoo, but I see high schools changing in a big way. A traditional high school, which is similar to what you have here, although it's changing with this program, it's changing with the JTED programs where you have options of other things outside the walls here, which is exciting. I think that more of that's going to happen. You're all consumers. You're consumers of your education. You're getting ready to start thinking about college. You get to probably choose what college you're going to go to or what you want to do. Air Force Academy, Grant said he might be interested in attending that. So pretty soon you put yourself, well now, people are consumers here. We all know that kids go to Tri-City. We all know that there are charter schools out there. There's an equine school. Maybe Bradshaw offers something that we don't offer. and so things are changing. One thing that I would really like to see change, and I don't know if it's going to happen in my career, but I think it's going to happen pretty quick, is if you're in a math class, and let's say it's Algebra 1, and you're a sharp Algebra 1 student, and you test and you show that you understand that information, my goal is to get those kids out of that class and move them to the next one, even if it's in mid-year. You should not be sitting in classes where you already know the material, because there's a seat time that you have to sit there and learn. I think it just is really tough on all of you for that. Love to see that change, and thinking about how we do that. Also, engagement is a critical piece. I think that our ICU is volunteers. You're volunteering your time. I mean, you're here and you kind of have to be. It's the way it might feel sometimes. But really, you are volunteering your time. And what I do as a classroom teacher and how I design that work, I have to engage in that. I feel responsible for that. And sometimes that's a culture shift, because you might have folks that say, I'm giving you the information. You learn it, and if you don't do anything with it, then that's your fault. And I think the responsibility needs to change. I think that we need to be responsible for engaging you and helping you with everything that you do. I know that a part of that career planning piece, that where the business folks are coming in, we want to build a stronger career program here so that you, when you go visit with your counselors, that you know all the options that are out there. You understand what schools you could go to, what schools offer what you're interested in going to. When you have all that kind of information, you understand scholarships and where you're headed with scholarships. There's an awful lot of money out there in scholarships.
Talking about scholarships, I know a lot of us are getting ready to take interviews and such for scholarships and schools and work and everything, and I was going to ask what your best piece of advice is to prepare for interviews or during the interview itself.
I think some of the skills that you learn here are the critical pieces. I think that looking someone in the eyes and being sincere and letting them know that you're a solid human being, I think that goes a long ways, and shaking their hand and just having some of those social things that you don't see all the time. Not everybody does that. Grant, I remember they have a similar scholarship like the Flynn Scholarship in Colorado. And those students at the high school that were applying for that, one thing that we get to do is we get to interview them. And we would have like 7 or 8 people similar to what they were going to face when they went to those interviews for those Flynn scholarships. And we got to ask them questions. They dressed up, they sat at the end of the table, we went and asked questions, and then at the end we got to review with them, how did they do? And lots of times it was not looking at the person that asked the question and thanking them for that, and then, you know, keeping in mind that you have other people and not putting your head down. Most of it was around how you present yourself and being confident in what you have to say. And that's about your voice inflection, and that's about who you are. And those are really critical components. I get asked to go to Rotary and go to all kinds of places, and I never know what's coming at me or what I'm going to say sometimes. But I know that if I stand up and I speak in a voice that is confident and that we're moving in the right direction, I usually get some positive results, even though I'm not sure the content was all there. But I'm just saying, you know, that's a lot. The social graces of what you learn in here are critical components. But, you know, I would do my homework, and I would know what they were looking for, or what I would think that they might be looking for. And they're willing to give that information. Everybody wants to see you be successful. You have to ask for help. I mean, I have found that to be true in everything that I've done, is if you go and you ask someone, people want to help. Yeah. So I'd like to see a career center here at the high school, and I'd like to continue to develop that. I'd like for all of you to have your phones out right now and pull up ice fishing, and you could see and ask me questions about that, and not have to feel like you're in trouble for having a phone. There's lots of issues with that, but I think the quicker that we get there and we engage you in the tools that you use. I mean, how many people text this morning before you came in, or were on Google, or had your phones, or were doing something? I mean, and then you come to school, and some guy comes to your first hour class and talks to you the whole time, and you're like, man, I could have done this and seen this, and, you know, on a YouTube.
You will see it on YouTube this afternoon.
I don't want to see it on YouTube, but but I think we need to engage you with that. Does anybody have Mrs. Townsend? I do. Is that? I mean, that's some tech stuff in there. Do you like that? Yes. Pretty engaging. Very. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We had last Monday when you guys were at home, and we were all, everybody came to work here. I went to Mrs. Townsend taught a lesson on how to use technology in the classroom, and the door said it's at capacity, so that meant no more people could go in, but I wanted to go in, so I broke the rules and I opened the door, and I walked in, and I just stood on the wall, and you know, a bunch of teachers sitting in similar desks like this, and they all had a Chromebook or an iPad or something like that, and it started getting interactive, and I'm like, hey, I think I can do that. And you know what? I followed through with all of that and got to throw out my comments on there, and I was engaged. I mean, it was just a great way, and you're seeing the results, you're seeing what people are thinking. I think we need to do more of that here, and just to provide you with the support that you need. Anybody thinking about going? Yes?
When you were growing up, is there something you wish you would have done different?
You know, I think there is. I think that I probably would have paid a little bit more attention to math and science. I'm being very honest with that. I'm pretty envious of Colonel Peoples in being, you know, I don't know if I would have liked to have flown an F-16. I think that would probably have been...
F-15, F-16 suck.
So, but, I mean, I've always liked I like airplanes, and I probably would have enjoyed doing something like that. I remember in 4th grade, I don't help my kids with their math homework, by the way. But I remember in 4th grade I had a teacher, and in that class, I used to like math, and in that class, I remember walking into the classroom, and there was a basket, and when you came in the morning, you'd take your math assignment, and you'd put it there, and then when math time came around, she'd take the papers, and she'd hand them out around the class, and you'd grade papers. That's when I started thinking, or believing, in my mind, it was a thought, and then it turned into a belief that I wasn't good at math. And I remember taking my math paper and I was putting it under the others. And then I remember when I'd hand you had my paper and you'd grade it, and then she'd go around and she'd say, "How'd Dave do?" And you would respond with a he got them half right, or he got 10 out of 20, or, you know, it was almost embarrassing for me. And I never had anybody, or did I go and ask for help? So I'm not blaming the teacher all, but I didn't, it was at that time I started creating this belief system that I wasn't good in math. And I think I could do math really well right now, because I'm more confident, and I think I could do that. But I think math and science, I would pay attention to that. I have, some of you might know my son is Chad. He's a sophomore in high school here. And then I have a daughter that's in 8th grade at Mile High. I should have mentioned my family first off, because they're the most important thing in my life. And my wife, Nancy, she's a massage therapist. She's a massage therapist. And I think, 5 years ago, she decided that she works with her hands and it's physical work. And she decided to go, and she likes the counseling side, so she went and got her master's degree. And has her master's in counseling, so she works in counseling, and she does that as a business. But yeah, so Chad's up here as a sophomore, and I learn about what's happening here at school. He doesn't tell me anymore, because he goes, "Dad, don't do that. Don't go and say anything. Don't do it." But that, and you know, as a superintendent's son, I was. And one of the hardest days for me was those snow days when my dad didn't call school off. Why didn't your dad close school? We could, you know, it was bad. And I had the same thing in Northern Illinois with that. And, you know, sometimes Emma and Chad come home and they're like, yeah, their kids lost maybe because you didn't close school. And I'd invite any of you, if you'd like me to help me with that decision some snowy morning, I'd love to have your input.
How do you make that decision? Like, what goes in?
The biggest thing is transportation. Mm-hmm. So they kind of guide it. Usually on those mornings, I hear from transportation at 4 in the morning, and they start taking buses out to see what it's like. This is really difficult here, just because the driveways and stuff that you have in Prescott, well, they weren't built for snow. I mean, you don't see that in Colorado. You don't see driveways that just go straight up and that, because they would never be able to get up and down. So at 4 in the morning, bus people come out. I tell her to give me a call like at 5 if she could let me know how things are going. And if we can get buses out, then we're probably going to go to school, or we'll go like a 2-hour delay. Mm-hmm. And if we can't get buses out, then you know what, then we're not going to have school. So that's kind of how it works. In Colorado, if we had 6 inches of snow, we went to school. But the buses there were equipped where the bus could stop on the road and drop the chains over the tires automatically and then start going.
That's pretty cool.
It is. It was.
We don't have that ability.
It was, but you know, we certainly had snow days, but you know what, that was like, you know, 1.5 foot of snow where we got pounded. So it was, you know, it was a little bit different deal.
Are you related to the people that like make Smucker jelly?
You know,
How many times did they do that?
every time I pull my credit card out or wherever I go, someone asks me that. But you know what? I am. So if you look at the back of a Smucker's jelly jar, it says J.M. Smucker, and that's Jerome Smucker, Orville, Ohio. And both of my folks were born in Orville, Ohio. And my grandfather used to work in that business, and he used to spin the apple butter, which is one of their first products. And I know both Kim and Tim Smucker, who are the CEO of Smuckers, and it sits in Orville. That was my uncle. Jerome was a great uncle. And so I'm on the other side of the tree. If I were on this side of the tree, I might not be here talking to you today. Maybe I would be on an airplane with someone else flying. I don't know what that would look like. But yeah, I have some relationship to Smucker's jelly. That's awesome. Yeah. And the other person that grew up in Orville, Ohio, is a guy named Bobby Knight. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Bobby Knight. He was a basketball coach, one of the winningest basketball coaches. And my mom knew him really well. And so when I was a kid, he probably had that impact on me, but I went to basketball camp at Indiana University for 6 or 7 years. And he was a big idol for me. I know he was a hothead. Actually, when I was in rifle, he called me and he travels. He's a big fisherman, and he gave me a call, and I went fishing with him on the White River. He said, put me on the river, and I got to fish with him a little bit. But he's a pretty neat man. That's what I think. But that's I'm a passionate. I love to be outside. I love to fish, and so those are some of the things that I do to fuel myself.
How about tell them about some challenging managerial situations you've had, maybe to get rid of people or hire people, or because again, they're students that are growing up in managing situations. A certain Grant and Colleen, have to worry about managing the people.
Yeah.
To reveal to them some of the challenges you might have had that surprised you, and then how did you get over them?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of things that happen that you wouldn't ever expect that would happen. And human beings make decisions that you wouldn't ever expect them to make, and when they violate policy, or they do something that sometimes it's the norm of the community, the social norms that you have here, and that's what develops policy that I have to follow. But I have to make those difficult decisions and ask people to step down or release them for some behavior or a choice that they made. So, I have a lot of things like that. Probably, one of the things that is most intriguing to me and one of the most difficult things to do is to change culture in an organization. And culture is one of those things, like when you come to school, if every teacher says, here's what you do, and I'll talk to you for 10 minutes about it, and I want you to do your homework, and do homework in class, and that happens every day. That's not what teaching is about. That's not what engagement is about. And how do you change a culture where that's how they learned how to do things? And so there are folks that, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not picking on teachers or anything, but sometimes you have to provide them with professional development and other ways of doing things. So a part of that's my role and responsibility. It's not just telling them to do things the same way. I have to provide resources and then help them be better at what they do. So I think as a leader, when I see someone that is faltering or not doing really well, then my job is to have a conversation with them and help them do a better job. And lots of times, my experience has been when people don't rise to the occasion, maybe it's not the job for them, and I can have a conversation with them. I've had many, many conversations with first and second year teachers that come in and they're not doing a good job or not meeting an expectation that we have. And you sit down with them and you say, do you really like this job? I mean, is this really filling your heart and you're passionate about it? I mean, I'm in your room every week, or I'm asking you what you're doing, you're probably tired of me. And you know what, they'll say, no, I don't really like this. And then I say, well, let's take a look at your personal strengths. What would you be good at? I mean, these are folks that have bachelor's degrees, they've gone through school. And so, this is a part counselor job too, I think. And it's working with people and getting the most out of what they can do. And when you can tap into that, or you can figure out how to do that, that's sometimes I think that's just sheer genius. Great leaders are incredible people, and then I love reading books around leadership and what they did. I mean, whether that's history or Churchill or Lincoln, or thinking about I mean, Lincoln. You guys, I grew up in Abe Lincoln country in Illinois, but Lincoln, when he was the president of the United States, his cabinet were people that despised him. And yet he placed them on that cabinet because he knew they had strengths in areas that he didn't. And look at the power in doing some of those kinds of things. And so, I know what some of my skills are. And so the people I put around me are people that are different thinkers and think differently and approach things differently. And when I put things in the middle of the table, we say, how might we go about doing this? They're going to have some other different kind of ideas. Mrs. Bradstreet, who is a teacher here, she's now an instructional coach. She thinks totally different than I do. And I love that about her, because what she brings to the table is something different. And usually when you have different thinkers, you get some pretty good results. I wouldn't want everybody to just come and say, oh yes, Dave, that's what we want to do. Oh yes, whatever you say, we want to do whatever you want to do. You know what? I don't really operate that way. I would prefer that people come in and challenge and take the risk of saying we can do that, and having a culture where people feel like they can do that. When I first came here, over in the district office, there's a pretty good sized table, and they said, oh, here's your chair, right at the end of the table. Take your seat, you're the boss, and people were calling me boss. And I said, I'm a player just like all of you. I know I have to make final decisions on stuff like that, but we're all here together to try and figure out the best thing. So I put myself right in the middle of the table. And then the next meeting, I was sitting in another spot, and after a while, they got used to that. And I know that I have power and authority and control. I don't want to use that. I want to use it. I like to work in what I call a learning organization, and learning and growing together, and having everybody be a part of that input. Because you know what? If I told them too, I said, if you expect me to sit in that seat and have all the answers and tell you what to do, you got the wrong person. And so working together in groups is super powerful. And I think that one of the things that you guys are going to do in The World is Flat, I mentioned that book. Students that go to art institutes, this super creative mind, and their they finish a 4-year degree, get jobs immediately. And a lot of Fortune 500 companies are grabbing those folks because they think differently. They don't have an MBA, they're not a lawyer, they're not thinking this like this is what happens. They come to the table and they're like, how about this? How about that? And when you really take a look and see what's happening right now, it's thinking way out of the box. And we have to think out of the box, or else this country is going to get eaten up by China and by Japan and those other countries. And some of that's happening as we speak. And so, your ability to be creative and sit at a table and have conversations around how we're headed and where we're headed are a critical factor to the success of the United States. I think I get pretty concerned about that. And those are some of the things that I think about. Is there another? Yes?
What is your opinion about how education has changed over time from your time here to this time?
It's changed a bunch, and some of it I don't like. So inside this room, I don't like the fact that they give labels to schools through those accountability systems. I don't like that they label you guys or gals. I don't like that piece. I don't like the label piece. I don't think we spend enough time around engagement and relationships with kids and recognize how important that is. And I think these standardized tests that you all take are there's accountability with it, and it shows you what you're learning, but it shouldn't be everything that we're doing. And I think sometimes we miss a personal piece. I think for teachers who went into this business because they care about people, they care about kids, they care about wanting to see people get better at what they do, it's driving them out, because all it is really about accountability. I have to make sure I teach this, and I teach this, and I teach this, and everybody knows it. And I think that that's an issue. In China right now, the United States has been looking at models from what are they doing in Norway, super successful programs there in Norway for education worldwide. They're at the top. Every teacher in Norway has a graduate degree or above, and all of them are paid significant money and are thought of by society as being society leaders. That's huge. And the other thing about China is China right now is trying to emulate what the United States has been doing for years, because we're so creative with what we do. The thinking that happens here in the United States in our education, our public education system, is around creativity. And it is a different way of thinking. In China, you guys are all in this class, and good for you. But there's a bunch of other kids in there that now might not have this kind of an opportunity and would never have that. And so what I think about is I don't want to pigeonhole kids or people, because some people graduate and think differently at younger ages. And right now China is trying to get rid of that standards-based system, and that this is what everybody has to know, because what you have is a bunch of robots that know all this information, but maybe can't sit down and talk and articulate the way that you can. And we're trying to go and do their thing. And
Doesn't China have the state-based education?
they do.
And so America has individual community-based education.
Yeah.
Do you believe that America should eventually go to a nation-based education?
No, I don't.
So you think...
I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't like it. And what's happening right now is the standards that are coming, the funding that comes, a lot of those decisions are made in you guys, I'm about done here.
Yeah, like 6-7 minutes.
Okay, but what's happening at the federal level is they're telling us what kids need to know across the United States. Funding comes with that if you choose to join. And if you don't, then you don't get money. Well, money's a little bit of an issue here. Probably all aware of that. And then all the assessments. And before, I'll go back 50 or 60 years ago, and I think we've changed for the good. But the local school board was the one that really determined what was good for the kids in their community to learn. I think we're missing that. I think we're missing the local piece of what's important for kids to know and be able to do. I think that when the first standards came out from a federal level, there were two issues. And the reason they went to state standards. One is to protect our homeland, we have to have people that know certain things and to get into our military. So they have to have certain skills. That was a big push. And the other is just to be able to be competitive in a global economy. And so we're going to make sure that everybody knows these certain things. But it is changing an awful lot. In the 50s and 60s, it used to be an activity of culling. You know, so we're going to take a test, and in this half of the class, you did really well, and you guys, you know what, you're going to struggle in high school, so why don't you go get a skills job, a blue-collar skills job. And there were lots of those non-skilled jobs. And you could buy a home, and you could have a family, and you could live. That doesn't happen anymore. Those blue-collar jobs are going away. And so what happens for people that don't get an education or aren't able to think or on their feet, what are they going to do? I mean, you know, McDonald's doesn't buy a house. But you could go and get skilled jobs. I mean, you could go and be, you know, you could be a mason, you could do a lot of those things. But that doesn't happen as much anymore. So you guys are, you know, that's just kind of where I'm at with standards-based, and I think there's some really good things to it. But I think the most important thing is that you guys are all engaged in what you do. I think that when you go into college, you probably find some of those sage people like I've been doing to you and just sitting and listening to me. I don't, it's not really probably very engaging, but when you go to college, you'll find some of that. But even college is changing. I mean, I think about folks that go to Stanford now. Those folks that go to Stanford, the number of Stanford graduates is reducing because they go into those programs and they get into this highly technical stuff and they land on something that will go big time, whether it's an app or it's another application or something technical. And they're leaving like when they're sophomores and juniors and they're moving into San Francisco and they're starting some .com or something like that and they're putting millions of dollars in their pocket. So the goal isn't to go and graduate from Stanford. The goal is to go and get the skills so that I can be creative and design something and start my own company. It's just, it's a different, it's a changing world in what's happening. So, you know, what I would tell all of you with that is science and math and those technical skills that you have. Those do matter. They're going to matter in the future, maybe just to get your foot in the right door. You know, just be creative and try and live your dreams and recognize that, you know what, someone's going to slam a door in your face. Something's going to happen at some point in time where you say, you know what, this might not be for me. Or maybe you say, you know what, I want to go and make $1 million. I'm going to go into business, and you get into that business. living in Chicago, and some of the guys that I knew there, they went down and they worked on the Mercantile Stock Exchange, and they hated every day of their life. They got up, they got on the train, they went downtown, they worked hard, they'd come back, and they said, I'm gonna do this for 10 years, and I'm gonna see if I can make $1 million, and then I am out of it, I don't like it. You know, so live what fills your heart. Do what, you know, I mean, that you'll live a good life if you're passionate about what you're doing. But you land in something just because you're making $1 million, and every day you go to work and you don't like it. I've never experienced that. Maybe I I see some cars I'd like to have driving around on the road now and then, but you know, there's a lot of other things that's more important.
Got time for one more question, guys.
I got one. How do you think you're different from your father as a superintendent? Do you think you guys are similar in the way you manage things, and what you remember from the way your father worked? Similar?
You know, I think it's changed a lot. I think he managed. He was a manager, so you know he made sure that the budget was taken care of. I got to do that, but I think I really got to think forward, and things are happening so quickly and changing so rapidly. I don't know that he experienced that at the level of what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So I think that they're a bit different, but the human side of it and dealing with people, it's probably the same.
Yeah.
Room, Ted Hunt. Go do great things. Dismissed.
Go do great things.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.